everyone and welcome to Brickcats. Today I'm reviewing the R22 A-Wing Starfighter designed by Jerac and distributed by Brickvault. As always, please consider leaving a like or comment, subscribing to the channel, or supporting what I do in any other way you see fit. I greatly appreciate it. The R22 is the A-Wing heavily featured in the Star Wars Rebels TV show from 2014. Built to be an interceptor, the Alliance relied on the A-Wing to conduct hit-and-run attacks on Imperial convoys and outposts from hidden bases before jumping to safety in hyperspace. This is obviously the dark green version you see here, but there are also blue and inverted blue color schemes included when you buy the instructions from Brickvault. With no substitutions, I got 4 stores and $136 without shipping and tax, or about $164 with shipping and tax, and I was able to get this under $100 in total, as the original parts list contains some fairly expensive pieces. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics and model features, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I close out with my overall impression and pricing information in the conclusion. I assume you bought the instructions or are interested in buying them, as well as a basic level of familiarity with Bricklink's ordering system and LEGO nomenclature. I only use genuine LEGO bricks and I always purchase the instructions. I create these reviews for my own personal enjoyment and in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. The R22 measures 8.5 inches from front to back, about 6 inches wide, and just under 2.5 inches tall on the landing gear. I modified the fighter slightly to fit on Jerac's X-Wing version 2 stand, and that lifts the model up a bit, and it tops out at just over 7 inches. Starting right at the nose, the R22 is different from the RZ1 in that there's no gap in the middle here. The dark green detailing is supposed to wrap around the edge of the fighter like this, but the available inventory from LEGO makes this rather difficult and or rather expensive, as the cone pieces in dark green are quite rare, and there's no dark green bar piece either. The dark green detailing around the cockpit, however, is spot on, and the sides of the fuselage include the concussion missile launchers, represented by this slit right here, and there's some nice shaping on the bottom, top and bottom, with these wedges here. The cockpit canopy has a very unique and pretty slick double hinge mechanism to get that open. And inside the cockpit itself, as you guys and gals know, if you've watched the channel before, I'm not too high on cockpit interiors in general. One thing I do like to see is a control stick of some kind, which is not present here. But this cockpit is appropriately cramped for what's a rather small fighter in canon. The little pod behind the cockpit is very nicely shaped. You can see that it matches up pretty much perfectly with the windscreen. And one of my favorite details on this model is inclusion of this little window right here, which is canon accurate. These yellow flag pieces are great color details to either side of the cockpit. And moving back to the engines, there is some white specific to the top of the fins here. I think these look a little bit out of place, just due to the general age state of the Rebel fighters, and that the rest of the hull is gray, but it certainly doesn't break the aesthetic. But dark tan and some yellow highlights for the engines look perfect to me, and this medium nougat circular piece at the end completes the look. On the rear edge of the fin, this yellow stripe is pretty thin in the show, but I think including it as a full tile makes a lot of sense, and it contributes to the overall look. The middle section in between the engines is a pretty interesting construction, and it also looks very close to what we see in the show, and from this angle you get the best view of the tail fins, which are slightly off vertical. The cannons on either side are very simple affairs, and they make great use of these Technic timing gears and have the red stripe in the middle. The underside of the fighter is mostly smooth, and it has some simple greeveling here under the cockpit, as well as the landing gear, which folds up pretty nicely. These are the rear skids. The front rest is hidden under this little compartment here, and for some reason my droid arms that hold these in have a lot of friction, and it's really difficult for me to get this out, so I'm not going to do it, because it will take me forever. And finally, my favorite little detail on this model is how these 4L bars form a continuation of the fins on the underside of the model. Sadly, this model does not come with a stand, so I'm using the Jerac version 2 X-Wing stand. And I minimally modified the bottom of the fighter so it would work. I think lack of a stand is this model's biggest and pretty much only flaw. It would be really nice if Jerac or Bricklink made stand instructions and the parts list available for free, or revamped the instructions and included the parts list in the instructions package. Overall, I really love the color schemes for the A-Wings we see in Star Wars Rebels, and this model does an excellent job recreating those details. This definitely has the Rebels look and feel, and it's immediately obvious this is from a different generation than the original trilogy models. The dark green R22 A-Wing model requires 137 elements and 588 pieces. Most of the following recommendations will apply to all of the color schemes. The parts list calls for 4 plate modify 1x1 with U-clip thick in light bluish gray, part 4085C, and 2 plate modify 1x1 with U-clip horizontal grip, part 6019 in yellow. These are older elements, and the more common O-clip variants in the same color, parts 4085D and 61252 respectively, will work just fine. Most of the core of the ship is completely hidden, and the list of pieces below can be any neutral color. Black, light bluish gray, dark bluish gray, or tan will work very well. The only places you can see these pieces are from inside the cockpit and underneath those vents at the bottom of the ship, and this should apply to all of the color schemes. The Technic Gear timing wheel 8-tooth used for the cannons is very uncommon in light bluish gray, and unfortunately due to how the cannons are connected, there's no logical substitute for this element. However, you might cut down your store count by changing the color from light bluish gray to light gray, which seems to have better availability in the United States. This should also apply to all the color schemes. The 17 tile modified 1x1 with clip, part 2555 in light bluish gray is the older mold. They work fine, but the newer element, the tile modified 1x1 with open O-clip, part 15712, also works and may be more available. The 4 plate modified 1x1 with light attachment, thick ring, part 4081B in light bluish gray are completely hidden and can be any color. The 2 plate modified 1x3 with 2 studs jumper in black, part 34103, are completely hidden, and this is used to connect the rear cockpit pod. Those can be any color. The 2 minifigure utensil ski with hinge in light gray, part 6120, works just as well in dark bluish gray in my opinion. But the mold without the hinge, part 99774, will also work if you don't mind dark bluish gray, as this is much more common. You can see I have not used the hinge piece here. The 2 tile 1x2 with groove with Star Wars computer pattern, part 3069 BPS1, go inside the cockpit here, and these can be substituted with any instrument panel you have on hand, or omitted entirely if you don't care about cockpit detailing. Finally, the README highlights 2 elements that are worth emphasizing here. 2 minifigure screwdrivers, narrow head, 6-rib handle, part 6246A are included in each parts list. I did not find these necessary for their intended purpose. Apparently they help stabilize the side panels here that have the concussion missile tubes. I wasn't able to even see where these would fit on mine, as the space indicated in the instructions was much too small to fit it in. If you're nervous about this section, you could consider buying a 3mm hose piece and cutting it into 2L sections as a substitute. The 6L hose in black is fairly inexpensive and widely available. And finally, the 2x4 tile in green, part 87079, are intended to go right here. These are extremely rare and very expensive, about $6 each from US sellers. I definitely recommend replacing these with these 4 2x4s with 8 1x4 dark green tiles, and adding 4 turntables, part 3679 in light bluish gray to hold them together. And obviously this recommendation would only apply to the dark green model. Jerac's R22 A-wing instructions have 51 numbered steps, however the actual count is probably at least triple that, as there are some subassemblies with their own smaller section. If you built Jerac's original trilogy A-wing, you'll definitely notice some design similarities, but it's been a while since I built that model and I still notice some differences. These instructions are also a few years old at this point, and for each color scheme you get a set of instructions with the previous steps faded or rendered in a teal color to highlight which pieces you're putting on in a given step. I definitely found the fading instructions easier to follow. The renders are set against a dark tan grid background, and the background color isn't an issue, but I think I generally prefer the outline method instead of the fading method. It's just a little less, I don't know. The teal really stands out, and for something that you're not supposed to be paying attention to, I just feel like it's a little too bright. The instructions are also in portrait mode, which isn't the best fit for most modern monitors, but I suppose this would be useful on a device like an iPad. Outside of the occasional pause, while I had to look a little harder to tell where things connected, the build goes reasonably smoothly. And without any sorting, this model took me about 3 hours to complete start to finish, and I certainly wasn't rushing. The only inaccuracy I found in the instruction steps was the paddle subassembly that holds these two front cones at an angle. Step 37 shows the paddles pushed all the way in against the middle tile with clip. However, to connect the cones to the paddle stud, the paddles need to be connected as close to the end of their bar section as possible, so the cone fits on step 40. It's entirely possible that whatever software Jerac was using at the time wasn't capable of showing this, but it is a minor pain to pull the paddle out further without popping it out, and reconnecting it can take some patience as you're working at kind of a small space at an odd angle. Lastly, I noticed that on some of the instruction sheets, the info panel in the lower right labels the fighter as the RZ-1, while others list it as the R22. It's not clear if there's an actual difference, or if the Alliance simply redesignated the R22 prototypes they acquired to the RZ-1, so maybe someone who knows better than I can explain in the comments. If you substitute the 1x4 dark green tiles for the 2x4 dark green tiles, you need to connect the outermost one, this one here. I used a dark bluish gray inverted 1x2 slope, but the turntables recommended in the README will also work and are probably better than my solution. So I think this model is suitable for builders with a little bit of experience under their belt. It's not so challenging to be impossible or frustrating to newer builders, but in a couple of places you'll need to pay closer attention as to how to make certain connections. The R22 A-wing definitely has some weak points, but it's reasonably sturdy overall. And the logical way to hold it is something like this. And the ship is very solid where you're applying pressure. So with my thumb, nothing's creaking around here. And then on the other side, this is all basically just solid plastic in between here and here. And as a result, this model will stand up to any reasonable amount of swooshing. The engines are reasonably sturdy, and the angle for the fins is locked in place very well. There's almost no play in the engines except the rearmost section here, which is just held in place by the surrounding pin, and this is a hollow round plate, so there's another round tile in there keeping it in place from the other direction. The cannons are connected with a bar clip wedged into the gap of the Technic timing wheel, and this is reasonably sturdy with a good amount of friction in that connection. And it also allows for a range of motion on the cannons if you want to pose them. And as you just saw, it's pretty easy to put the cannons back on if they pop off. The most obvious weak spot is towards the front of the fighter, especially assuming most people are going to be using the 1x4 tiles instead of the 2x4 tiles. And the main issue here is that there's no vertical support between the top and the bottom of these two angled sections, like right here. So it's pretty easy to collapse if you just press really hard on this, or even not very hard. Luckily, you need to be pretty purposeful to do that, as you're not really putting your hands on the front here. And this model is even pretty stable, resting on the landing gear. And lastly, these cone assemblies can be a little finicky depending on the pieces you get. Anecdotally, these are new elements here, and it seems like the connection is pretty good on mine. On my RZ-1 A-wing, I definitely used pieces that were used, and those are noticeably looser. I've had these instructions for quite a while, and I recently started working my way through the Rebels show. It's so good, and the time was right to build this model. The model is really great, it's highly accurate, and it's durable enough for most builders. It has decent play features, with a minimum of care can stand up to casual, but I would say measured play. Furthermore, it's one of those models that breaks out of the standard gray, white, red color palette of the Alliance, and it looks great on the stand. Unfortunately, the stand is not included, and that's really this model's only flaw. Like I said in the introduction, with no substitutions, I got 4 stores and $136 without shipping and tax, or $164 with shipping and tax. With all the various substitutions, including color, and most importantly, those 2x4 dark green tiles, I got 4 stores and $96 without shipping and tax, including 1 dedicated order for a bunch of the timing gears due to a high store minimum for that particular seller. This comes out to about $124 with shipping and tax. And using Pick a Brick, 123 elements were available directly from LEGO, totaling $57. This met the thresholds for eliminating the handling charges for both bestseller and standard items, as well as the $35 minimum for free shipping. The remaining 11 elements could be purchased from 3 Bricklink sellers, totaling $22 without shipping and tax, again including 1 store order just for the timing gears, which turned out to be about $40, including shipping and tax. Therefore, the grand total was just $97. Instructions for the R22 are $15.99 from BrickVault's website, and you get the instructions and parts list for 3 different color schemes in the instructions package. Thanks for watching my review of Jerac's R22 A-Wing. If you built this model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Remember to leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel, or follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, and I hope to see you back next time.